Hey guys, welcome back to the Kitten Space Agency public release pre-alpha. My name is Twitchi and I'm going to teach you two ways in this video to get to the moon. First, I'm going to teach you using the fully automatic transfer planner, and secondly, we will make our own maneuver nodes and fly there manually. After loading the game, I open up the solar system. Every time I try to do a transfer plan in just the Earth-Moon system, my game crashed. Your mileage may vary there. You may have a more stable existence just with the Earth-Moon system, but I didn't. So I had to open the entire solar system, and one of the first things I'm going to do is tidy up the map view. We do this by pressing M to toggle the map, going up to the view menu, going down to orbital lines and selecting show none, and then I can turn specifically the moon, the Earth's, and our own rocket's orbital lines back on. This will declutter the map and make things much easier to see. The next thing we need to do is open the transfer planner. We can either do this by pressing F4 on your keyboard, or you come up to view and click transfer planner right there. This window's a little bit complicated, but I think we can talk each other through it nice and easily. At the top we have a drop-down menu to select the program we're going to do. Hohmann, circularize apoapsis or periapsis. I never use the other two. I only use the Hohmann transfer orbit to go from one body to another. The source is the vessel that is going to move, and of course the destination is where we're planning to go. For this trip we are planning a Hohmann transfer. The source is the rocket that we load in by default, and our destination is Lunar. Underneath those, I leave the time constraints of the prediction as defaults. They seem to do well every time so far. And then underneath that, I checkbox to set this as target. That will put the moon, the Lunar, as our target in this box over on the right of your UI. Technically called the rendezvous box, but it's a target box. Look, it's got the word target on it. Anyway, with all the restraints placed into the various fields, it's time for us to hit the calculate button and be overwhelmed by the amount of information that is given to us here. Don't worry, automatically it has already selected the cheapest flight you could possibly do. But I'm just going to quickly talk through this graph. Up and down we have our time of leaving. The closer to the top we are, the more now we are, and the closer to the bottom we are, the more in the future. The dark blue line is the cheapest point, the delta V. The red, of course, is the most expensive. And then left to right we have how long the flight is going to take. On the left is the shortest flight possible, on the right is the longest flight possible. You can click all around on this map to try and find the best transfer window. I really do actually recommend just leaving it as default, but because I want to leave as soon as possible and be as quick as possible in space, I'm going to choose the bluest section in the furthest top left section that I can find. That gives me a cheap, fast, soon flight date. Happy with the details of this planning, I can hit the create button to create a maneuver plan. You can tell it has gone well because the box above our target plan also now has been populated with a whole bunch of numbers. Coming over to the map screen, again M to toggle, you can see our planned trajectory in yellow. The map is filled with a bunch of other markers here, the green ones in particular around Earth, showing you the closest approach to Lunar here. I don't find those particularly helpful. I do, however, find the approach and entering Lunar's sphere of influence to be very helpful. The sphere of influence is the point where the game stops calculating your position around Earth and starts calculating it around the moon instead. With the plan laid down, it's pretty much a free ride to the moon from this point. We go over to the burn control box. That is what this box above the target box is called. And we've got a series of controls that both help our positioning, our pointing, and will do the burn for us. On the right hand side, we've got the control and position. If you hit that button, it will point your spacecraft in the orientation that your spacecraft needs to be for the next burn. If you happen to have got your ship the wrong way round, there is also a negative marker of that, so it will point you backwards, the reverse of what your burn should be, and of course a null rotation in case things have gone crazy. Once your ship is pointing in the right direction, I recommend that you tell the autopilot that you wish it to take over by pressing the auto button and then hit the automatic warp button. The game will automatically wheel you into the future until about 15 seconds before your burn, at which point it will drop you into regular time and you get to contemplate whether you've made all the correct choices before your engine fires up. There are two numbers in particular on the burn control window that I feel like you should be paying attention to during your burn. The first is the burn time, that is how long is left in the engine burn at the moment and how long until the engine will turn off. And just underneath that there is the delta V yet to be spent, that is how much you need to change your velocity. These two numbers should reach 0 at exactly the same time, at which point the game will turn everything off and you are on a free fall trajectory towards the moon. If you do nothing else at this point, you will enter the moon's sphere of influence. A small point that was easily missed in the footage was after the burn was complete, I went ahead and used the burn control buttons to delete the old maneuver node that we had finished. If you don't follow along with that, it will get very confusing when we get to the moon using the power of time accelerate and maybe a little bit of video editing here. We've entered the moon's sphere of influence. You can tell this either from the map by seeing yourself move directly into the sphere of influence, or if you are in the rocket view, you will notice that your nav ball in the bottom left suddenly makes a sharp transition to a different frame of reference. The colors will change and spin around. Either way, this tells you that you are now inside the moon's sphere of influence, no longer being controlled by Earth, and it's the perfect time to bust out one of those other planning type that was seen in the transfer planner, the circularized periapsis. We're going to use that to make this rocket's orbit circular inside of the moon. We literally just select circularized apoapsis, click rocket and click calculate, and the maneuver node is there for us. Closing all that down, we just do the standard hit auto and warp, and the game will go ahead and perform this maneuver for us, leaving us in a very nice circular orbit around the moon. From this point you could plan a whole host of maneuvers, but that's really meant for part 2. To fly to the moon manually, we're going to start by manually making a flight plan. To create a flight plan, the first thing we need to do is click on our orbit a little further around from our current position, and this will create a small yellow dot that we can click on to get access to the maneuver controls. Using the red controls, we can speed up and slow down our orbit, and that should be the only controls that we need for this maneuver. The green ones will change the tilt of our orbit, and the blue ones will rotate our orbit around our planned maneuver's position. The blue ones in particular are not that intuitive, so I'm going to ignore those for today and tell you that all you need to do is to drag out the red arrow that points forwards in your orbit until the other side of your planned orbit is high enough to reach the moon. I personally have done this so many times that I know exactly how far ahead of my current position to click on the orbit, but if you don't have that intuition yet, I have got a simple way of finding the correct timing. Click anywhere on your orbit and extend your planned trajectory so the apoapsis touches the moon's orbit. This happens when your planned burn is prograde by about 3.1 or maybe 3.2 kilometers per second. You can then grab the yellow dot and drag it around your current orbit until you find the position where you will encounter Lunar. However you arrived at your trajectory, I always like to make sure that my periapsis is passing just behind the back, at least relative to Lunar's path around Earth, to the back of Lunar. This just sets me up nice for a circularization, or if I want to use it for a little bit of a gravitational slingshot, this is actually the position that I would start my burn. Editing the possible maneuver is done either by the arrows as I've been showing you, or in the burn window we can tweak the delta V expenditure amount using the plus and minus and multiplier to get the exact correct course that we are after. Happy with the predicted trajectory, I now turn to the nav ball and change our frame of reference from orbital to burn. The thing with the burn frame of reference is the 00 mark on the nav ball is always the direction you want to be burning, and unless you've set up your craft wrong or something. As long as everything is well aligned, 00 is where you should be pointing. If you find that you are having trouble moving around, maybe you have one of the autopilot settings on, you want to make sure that you have manual on the top left. If you have null rotate or forwards or anything like that set, unfortunately you will not be able to move your craft at all. Make sure that you are set to autopilot manual. Once I found 00 in the burn frame of reference, I put the null rotation autopilot on. This does change us to the star frame of reference, but if I switch back, I find it does not make that much difference, so I'm all good with that. I cannot guarantee that that will be consistent over significant fractions of an Earth year as you move relative to the star, but over this short journey, it works out pretty well for us. Now here I'm going to be using a lot of the dials and indicators that we were using during the automatic flight. I'm going to be using the burn time, and indeed the time until we start our burn is probably the most important timer right now. Waiting for that to turn down to 0 before I click the ignite button, and then I'm waiting for my burn time timer to click down to 0. I suppose more specifically the delta V dial to burn down to 0. If, like me, you find full throttle to be a little too much, indeed I overshoot a couple of times and end up having to turn my throttle down using the arrow keys on my keyboard. Up and down is throttle up and down. After a little finessing, I end up in the orbit that I am looking for, and we just spend a little bit of time warping our way up to the moon. We find ourselves in exactly the same position as we did in the auto run, but rather than going for the circularization planner, we're going to go and do this manually. We're going to point retrograde. Prograde is towards our direction of travel, pro forwards, and retrograde is backwards from our direction of travel, retro reverse. To slow down, we need to point towards our retrograde and accelerate backwards. This is one of the weird things about spaceflight. Everything's acceleration, including slowing down. When our periapsis and apoapsis numbers were roughly the same, within a couple of orders of magnitude at least, I decided to stop the thrust, but then I was like, wait, we've got the power of manual control, and my periapsis is currently over the sunshine, so let's lower that down quite a distance, and then use the warp to periapsis button to take us all the way there. You could argue that this is no longer manual because I used a warp to button. I would argue that actually maybe you're correct, and I just forgot at that exact moment in time, but we could very easily have manually used a period and comma to speed up and slow down ourselves. But now that we found ourselves over the lit surface of Lunar, I think it's time we slowed down, stopped, and tried to perform a little bit of a landing maneuver here. Not really aiming for anywhere in particular, just trying to put down without sending ourselves into a ridiculous tumble. Using the retrograde marker, I used the engine to slow us down until the impact point was somewhere that looked fairly reasonable, a nice distance in front of us, but not too far away, and again, not too far underneath us, so that we will be coming in at a bit of an angle rather than coming straight down on top of our target. At this point, I want to swap over to surface frame of reference. No longer do I need to care about my orbital dynamics, I need to care about my surface dynamics. The only thing that might trip you up with the nav ball on the left hand side at this point is dark is night. I don't know why, but when I was trying to use this nav ball, I kept on thinking that the black bit was the ground. That is not the way. The sky, look, you can see on the screen right now, the sky is dark there. With the mare creeping over the horizon there, I decided it's time to start some personal landing preparations. I do a small burn upwards to feel how the engine can fight gravity at this amount of throttle, and also point myself backwards just to make sure that we are set for a complete nullification of speed. Noticing that crater over there, I decide now might be the time to do said nullification of speed and bring my speed that is being tracked in the top left hand corner as close down to 0 as I can right now. A little bit of topology in the background for the landing wouldn't go amiss. And whilst we are dropping down to the surface, I think at this point I will do the YouTubery thing of saying, if you have found any value in this video, could I please ask you to leave a like? It really does help me get out there, the algorithm, to recommend this to other people. If you like the idea of Kitten Space Agency content, please do feel free to subscribe. It is free, and you will hopefully get more notifications for my videos for doing so. We're within the last couple of 100 meters of landing right now, trying to bring this down pretty gently, even though there are no explosions in this game. Beautiful touchdown, a wonderful thing. I hope to see you in the future. Goodbye.